December 16th, 1944, Ardennes Forest. The Americans thought they were finally catching their breath. Paris had been liberated, German units were retreating, and many believed the war in Europe would end within weeks. But at dawn, the quiet snowy forest erupted. Artillery thundered across the hills. Entire American positions vanished under the weight of a sudden German counterattack. Hitler had launched his last gamble, an offensive meant to split the Allied armies in half. Chaos spread instantly. Retreating soldiers spoke of armored columns appearing out of the mist, of units overrun in minutes, of roads jammed with civilians and shattered vehicles. Command posts couldn't understand what was happening. Radio lines went dead. Reports contradicted each other. Some officers insisted it had to be a mistake. Germany wasn't capable of this anymore. But one man had predicted it weeks earlier. General George S. Patton, commander of the U.S. Third Army, had warned that Germany would not simply collapse. He believed the Ardennes, thinly defended, heavily wooded, buried in snow, was the perfect place for a desperate counterstrike. Most commanders dismissed the idea. Patton didn't argue. He prepared. So when the offensive smashed the American lines, Patton didn't hesitate. In a room full of stunned generals, he calmly told Eisenhower he could turn his entire army 90 degrees and attack the German flank within 72 hours. Some thought he was boasting. Others thought he was insane. No army that size had ever moved that fast in winter. But Patton's staff had already rehearsed 3 emergency attack plans. Before anyone understood the scale of the crisis, his convoys were rolling north. Columns of tanks, trucks, and half-tracks pushed through ice, snowstorms, and pitch-black nights. Temperatures dropped so low that engines froze, and soldiers slept inside running vehicles just to survive. Military police struggled to keep intersections clear as entire divisions surged forward, headlights covered, silhouettes fading into the winter fog. Yet they moved, relentlessly. By December 22nd, the Germans had surrounded the town of Bastogne, trapping the 101st Airborne without food, medical supplies, or ammunition. When German envoys demanded surrender, the defenders replied with one word: nuts. But courage alone couldn't keep them alive. They needed relief, and Patton was already closing in. On December 26th, through blinding snow, the lead tanks of Patton's 4th Armored Division smashed into the German ring around Bastogne. Exhausted paratroopers cheered as American armor rolled into the town. The breakthrough didn't end the fighting, but it broke the offensive's momentum. What had looked like a German resurgence now began to collapse. Patton didn't stop. His army pushed deeper into the Bulge, tearing apart German fuel lines, smashing isolated pockets, and forcing the enemy into retreat. What Hitler believed would split the Allied front instead drained the last German reserves. By January, the Bulge in the front line had been erased. Germany would never again launch a major offensive in the West. And the impossible maneuver that saved the front, the 72-hour pivot of an entire army in the dead of winter, became one of the most remarkable operational achievements of the Second World War. Patton didn't just fight the German offensive, he outran it, outthought it, and turned it into the moment Germany truly lost the war. January 1945. The German offensive had stalled, but it was far from over. Patton's breakthrough into Bastogne was the turning point, but he knew one thing clearly. If he stopped now, the Germans would regroup and strike again, and they still had enough strength to prolong the war for months. While newspapers in the United States celebrated the saving of Bastogne, Patton kept pushing. His staff worked day and night, carving out new supply routes through frozen valleys and destroyed bridges. Officers complained that the troops were exhausted, the vehicles worn out, and heavy snow often limited movement to just a few miles a day. Patton's response was always the same. We cannot allow them to recover. No retreat, no rest. He understood a simple truth. The German army was still dangerous, but only barely. They were fighting on their last fuel, their last ammunition, their last reserves pulled from every corner of the collapsing Reich. If the Allies pushed now, they would break the German army completely. Early January, German forces still held a defensive line nicknamed the outer edge of the Bulge. Their armored divisions, the 2nd, 9th, and parts of the 6th SS Panzer Army, were trying to keep open the narrow corridors that fed their front. But weather and exhaustion crushed them. Many German tanks simply ran out of fuel during battle. Crews abandoned Tigers and Panthers, leaving them as frozen steel monuments on the roadside. Patton saw this and doubled the pressure. American columns advanced through icy roads littered with burned-out vehicles. Snipers hid in the dark spruce trees. German commandos in American uniforms sowed chaos at major intersections. Every mile was paid for dearly, but the Third Army pushed forward, yard by yard, day by day. A decisive moment came near the towns of Houffalize and Wiltz, key crossroads the Germans needed to pull back what remained of their armored units. Patton understood that if these routes were cut, the entire German force west of the Bulge would be trapped. He ordered a double envelopment, a maneuver almost impossible in the harsh winter. When American soldiers finally entered Houffalize, they found not a fortress but panic. Abandoned trucks, piles of ammunition, scattered documents. Reports confirmed what Patton already suspected. German commanders knew their offensive had failed. Meanwhile, Allied leaders debated the next step. Some argued they should stop, regroup, straighten the front. Others insisted they should destroy all German forces inside the Bulge. Patton was firm. "We're not defending, we're finishing this." He demanded the complete elimination of the German threat, and soon his position became the obvious one. By mid-January, American and British units, attacking from the south, north, and west, began squeezing the German positions like a vice. At some points, only a few miles separated the Allied pincers. German forces tried to escape along clogged roads filled with wrecked tanks and fleeing civilians, but their attacks were losing strength. Roads turned into graveyards of armor. Patton ordered, no pause, no slowdown. His soldiers marched half asleep, ate on the move, endured freezing nights, but they knew one thing. This was the end of Germany's last offensive. The final blow. January 24th, 1945. The front officially returned to its pre-offensive lines. The Bulge disappeared. The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last attack in the West, was over. Allies suffered heavy losses. German losses were even worse. But the most important fact was this. Germany had burned its last reserves. From now on, the collapse of the Third Reich was only a matter of time. Patton looked at the map and understood. The road into Germany was open. The question was no longer if the Reich would fall, but how. February 1945. The Battle of the Bulge had ended, but for Patton, this wasn't the finish. It was the beginning of the final act, destroying the remaining German forces and carrying the war into the heart of the Reich. Allied commanders debated how to advance toward the Rhine. The British favored a massive northern operation. American generals preferred a central push. But Patton saw what others considered madness. Strike early, strike fast, and hit before the Germans could form any kind of defense. He knew German high command counted on the Rhine, their last natural defensive line. On the eastern bank, Hitler gathered the remnants of his army. Volkssturm militia, cadets, shattered divisions, anyone who could hold a rifle. But morale was collapsing, fuel was almost gone, and ammunition was dwindling. Patton saw an opportunity. "If we reach the Rhine before Montgomery, the war ends sooner," he wrote in his diary. And he was right. While British forces prepared a massive operation, Patton made a bold decision. Cross the Rhine quickly and unexpectedly. German intelligence believed the main American attack would strike further south. So under thick night fog, American engineers built pontoon bridges, working under fire, exhausted, freezing, but unstoppable. On the night of March 22nd to 23rd, Patton's units began the crossing. Many officers argued it was too early, too dangerous, too risky. Patton believed the opposite. This was the perfect moment. At dawn, German artillery opened fire, trying to break the bridges. Shells exploded in the river, sending columns of water into the air. But the bridges held. American tanks rolled onto the east bank. That morning, Patton sent a message to Eisenhower that would become legendary. "Sir, I make a solemn report. The Third Army has crossed the Rhine, by a bridge." Allied leaders were stunned. Germans were shocked. The Rhine, the line Hitler swore no enemy would cross, had fallen in hours. German units began collapsing deeper into the Reich, abandoning towns, losing supply lines, surrendering in groups. Patton headed for one goal, Berlin. He believed American forces could take the capital before the Soviets. Many historians agree he had a real chance. But politics intervened. Eisenhower ordered him to stop and pivot south to eliminate a rumored Alpine fortress. That fortress never existed. but the order stood. Patton was furious. In his diary, he wrote, "We stopped where we could have crushed the enemy completely. Still, the Third Army advanced relentlessly. German towns fell one after another. Resistance crumbled. German columns surrendered by the thousands. Officers abandoned their posts, knowing the end had come. April 30th, Hitler took his own life in Berlin. May 7th, Germany signed surrender. The war in Europe was over, but not for Patton. He saw a ruined Germany, and he saw who controlled the East. He watched the Red Army occupy one country after another. He understood something few dared to say. A new conflict was already beginning. "We fought the wrong enemy," he warned. His statements shocked Allied leaders. Some called him unstable. Others said he couldn't accept peace. But Patton saw the future with painful clarity, a future later known as the Cold War. Within months, he was removed from command. Soon after, he died in a car accident that remains controversial to this day. But his soldiers remembered one truth. In the Ardennes and in Germany, Patton proved what real speed, real strategy, and real leadership look like. His enemies respected him. His allies feared him. History honored him. Because when Germany tried to change the fate of Europe, the man who ended it was named George Smith Patton.